We begin, though, with the latest on that Christmas parade horror in Wisconsin. This morning, we're seeing newly released video that appears to show the man police say drove an SUV into the crowd, killing 5 people, of course, and injuring dozens of others.
Take a look. This video from a Ring doorbell camera shows what appears to be Daryl Brooks knocking on a man's door about 20 minutes after the crash. The other man in that video, Daniel Ryder, said he had no idea what had just happened and invited Brooks into his home and made him a sandwich before police showed up at his house. A vigil was held last night for the victims of the crash, and despite the tragedy, neighbors say they are drawing hope from each other.
Seeing everyone there that was willing to go and help everyone was just really good sight to see. I mean, you keep seeing that quote go around that you should look for the helpers in tragedies like this. So that's just what we've been trying to focus on.
And joining us now from Waukesha, Wisconsin, NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett. Maura, let's start with the suspect. We learned he has a lengthy criminal history. What more do we know about him and the charges he's now facing?
Well, Vicki, Daryl Brooks is a 39-year-old man from the Milwaukee area, and he does have a very extensive background with criminal charges, a lot of violent charges included. He's been charged with nearly 10 crimes, if not more, over the last 20 or so years. They include arrests around sexual abuse, drugs, battery, and domestic abuse. And most recently, he's had a few arrests around domestic abuse. He was actually fleeing a domestic stabbing incident when he was driving through the parade in that red SUV on Sunday. And he was arrested earlier this month and let go on a $1,000 bail, which now the Milwaukee DA is saying was inappropriately low for a man with his criminal history. And so obviously lots of concerns around that, considering how many people were affected. 5 people dead after this incident, 48 more injured. And so Brooks will face a hearing later today. He's facing 5 counts of homicide. The district attorney also noted that more charges could be added at a later date, Vicki.
Maura, 5 people were killed in this tragedy, many more in the hospital. What have you learned about the victims?
The 5 victims ranged in ages from 52 to 81. Some of them were members of that group that we were talking about yesterday, the Dancing Grannies. And there were a lot of children in this parade. There was marching bands. There were children coming to see Santa Claus for the first time. And so we do know that 18, if not more, children are being treated in the hospital right now, 10 of them in the ICU, 6 of them in critical condition. So very serious injuries that doctors are focusing on, ranging from broken bones, facial abrasions, and head trauma. So we'll be looking to get more updates on those victims later today, but that's the latest we have as of late yesterday.
Oh, such a tragedy. As we mentioned, a vigil was held last night for everyone there. Tell us about this community. You spoke to people at the vigil. How are they dealing with what has to be so much shock and loss?
What we kept hearing last night at the vigil was that this doesn't happen in places like Waukesha. Even from our experience here the past couple of days, this is a very tight-knit, close community. Everyone telling us that it's normally very safe. So it came as a shock, but this community is also proving to be incredibly resilient. I want to hear from some of the community members we spoke with last night.
This is an attack on the community, and it's absolutely heartbreaking and tragic. But at the same time, I know this community very well, and I know that they will come together, and I mean, they're going to rise up again, and everything's going to be fine. And
we're here. We're going to show everybody. We're going to show the community. We're going to show the families that are suffering. We're here.
A very emotional night last night. Obviously, hundreds showing up, braving the frigid cold in order to pay their respects and show the community that they're going to support each other moving forward. I'm standing along Main Street where the parade was on Sunday. It was shut down yesterday for the police investigation, but it opened up by midday yesterday as businesses and people started to come out and reopen and push forward together. Vicki?
Such a picturesque town there in America and going through such a horrific time. Maura Barrett, thank you so much for your reporting.
Prosecutors are set to deliver final remarks today in the trial of 3 men accused of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. Yesterday, attorneys set out their closing arguments before the predominantly white jury. The prosecution said the men attacked Arbery based on assumptions.
The state's position is all 3 of these defendants made assumptions about what was going on that day, and they made their decision to attack Ahmaud Arbery in their driveways because he was a black man running down the street.
Meanwhile, the lawyer for one of the men on trial, Travis McMichael, said his client fired the shotgun at Arbery in self-defense.
Travis is in a state of disrepair. There is no question that Ahmaud's hands are on this gun, and the medical examiner from that stand told you that if Ahmaud Arbery is grabbing this gun and trying to pull it away, that as the gun gets pulled out of his hands and fired, it could fire right on that wrist and shoot into the chest and go across the body.
NBC News correspondent Cal Perry is in Brunswick, Georgia this morning. Cal, good morning. So another dramatic day in court. We just heard a little bit from both sides of this argument, but walk us through some of the key arguments made yesterday.
Yeah, so yesterday we heard closings first from the prosecution, from the state, then from the defense team. Interestingly enough, the defense team, if you sort of broadly want to frame it, it was sort of first this citizen's arrest law. They say that is why the defendants were brought to the scene where they confronted Arbery. And then it's really a self-defense play. Interestingly enough, we did see some splintering, though. You have each defense attorney for each of the defendants giving a bit of a different argument. So, for example, the last defendant who was in that backup pickup truck, his attorney saying, look, if my client wasn't there, would the outcome have changed? Interesting to sort of see a division there. Now, for the prosecution's point, for the state's point, they were really trying to flush out this idea that a citizen's arrest is basically fraudulent, that it is a thing that doesn't exist, that you would have to witness the felony in order to actually carry that out. And none of these men actually witnessed any wrongdoing. Now, we heard more from the prosecution on the broader aspects of the case. Certainly race, they say, was involved. Take a little bit of a listen to what we heard from Linda Donikowski. She's representing the state in this case.
Mr. Arbery was under attack. They committed 4 felonies against him, and those are the 4 felonies in the indictment. Then they shot and killed him, not because he was a threat to them, but because he wouldn't stop and talk to them. And they were going to make him, absolutely make him stop. We're going to point a shotgun at you. That'll make you stop.
Now, this morning, shortly after court gavels in, Linda Donikowski will finish her rebuttal. That will finish out the closing arguments, at which point we expect this to be handed over to the jury, Savannah.
Now, in one of the more controversial moments, one of the defense attorneys, Laura Hogue, blamed Arbery for the shooting and even criticized his appearance. First, let's listen to what she said.
Turning Ahmaud Arbery into a victim after the choices that he made does not reflect the reality of what brought Ahmaud Arbery to Satilla Shores in his khaki shorts with no socks to cover his long, dirty toenails.
Cal, tell us, what's been the reaction to those comments?
Well, look, the supporters of the family are calling the comments dehumanizing. They're saying this is a way not only to victim blame, but that it harks back to the racism of the past. That's what we heard from the family's attorney. Now, during that moment in the court, the mother of Ahmaud Arbery actually walked out. She came out, spoke to the media. Take a listen to what she said.
When I heard prosecutor, the Hogues, she described Ahmaud as his long legs and his dirty, long toenails. That was just beyond rude. Regardless of what kind of toenails he had, what size legs he had, that was still my son. And my son actually was running for his life in that description. I thought that was just flat out just rude.
Certainly not the first time we've heard what many people are saying are outrageous comments coming from the defense, but certainly a moment that looked very, very painful when you're here for the family, Savannah.
All right, Cal Perry, thank you so much.
Days after being acquitted of homicide, Kyle Rittenhouse is speaking out, saying he acted in self-defense when killing 2 men in the unrest following the 2020 police shootings of Jacob Blake. In an exclusive, nearly hour-long interview with Fox News, Rittenhouse recounts the night of the shootings, his experience in jail, and his opinion of the Black Lives Matter movement. Here's some of that conversation.
I didn't call my mom after I saw her, and she was in shock. She was like, she wanted to go into hiding, and I said, no, the right thing to do would be to turn myself in. I didn't do anything wrong.
So you knew that from the very beginning?
I knew that. A lot of people are like, oh, Kyle had time to meet with his attorneys to come up with this amazing defense of self-defense. No, that's not the case. This has been 100% self-defense from the beginning, and I didn't know there was 100 cameras. I knew but I did know I was attacked, and I defended myself.
What do you think would have happened to you if there hadn't been the amount of video that there is?
I can't even imagine. I don't think we'd be sitting here right now having this talk, Tucker. I'm not a racist person. I support the BLM movement. I support peacefully demonstrating. And I believe there needs to be change. I believe there's a lot of prosecutorial misconduct, not just in my case, but in other cases. And it's just amazing to see how much a prosecutor can take advantage of somebody. Like, if they did this to me, imagine what they could have done to a person of color who doesn't maybe have the resources I do, or is not widely publicized like my case.
What did you make of the President of the United States calling you a white supremacist?
Mr. President, if I could say one thing to you, I would urge you to go back and watch the trial and understand the facts before you make a statement.
That's not a small thing to be called that.
No, it's actual malice, defaming my character for him to say something like that.
Were you surprised by the verdict?
I wasn't. I thought they came to the correct verdict because it wasn't Kyle Rittenhouse on trial in Wisconsin. It was the right to self-defense on trial. Right. And if I was convicted, no one would ever be privileged to defend their life against attackers. And thank God they came to the correct verdict of a not guilty.
Let's bring in Kyle Johnson from Kenosha's Black Leaders Organizing Communities. Kyle, good morning. So first off, just your reaction to what we just heard from Kyle Rittenhouse in that interview.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me on. And, the first thing I wanted to say was my heart and my thoughts are with those in Waukesha. But as far as what Kyle just said, I don't believe that he was there for self-defense. I watched the trial for the most part, and throughout the trial, you could see during different phases, the prosecutors asking, why did you yell friendly here? Or why were you introducing yourself as someone who wasn't hostile here? And this whole idea of I can place myself in a situation where I know it may be dangerous or may not be welcoming to me, and then claim self-defense, it's not viable. And I think a lot of folks here in the community didn't buy it.
Kyle, tell us a little bit about your organization and then what this verdict means for you and your organization and protests moving forward.
Yeah, so I am the Kenosha and Racine community organizer for Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, BLOC. And, during these past 3 weeks, not only as a Black man in America, but an organizer and a member of this community, it's been tough, frankly. And we've been trying to figure out not only a way to keep this peaceful and provide a space for folks to share their feelings, no matter what the verdict was, because we were gathering outside of the Regiment Barbers Collective starting Tuesday night, and we were there every day until Friday when the verdict came out. And our whole purpose was to ask folks to come together for healing, to build community, but also to reimagine what our community can look like, what our city can look like, what our state can look like, and what our country can look like. Because we know that what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse is not a one-off. It's a symptom of the institution. So we need to address the systems and the institutions versus just taking this by a case-by-case basis.
All right, Kyle Johnson, thank you so much for your time this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Turning now to concerning new numbers in the fight against COVID. Several states are seeing a major increase in the number of COVID cases being reported as more Americans prepare to celebrate the upcoming holidays. According to the CDC, COVID cases in the U.S. have jumped 18% since last week. Experts are now urging every adult to get their booster shot as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is pushing ahead with its vaccination initiative. According to the White House, 90% of federal workers are vaccinated. They expect that number to rise to 95% under the new vaccine mandate. Dr. Bob Lahita joins us now for more on this. And Dr. Bob is a professor at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine. He's also the director of the Institute for Autoimmune and Rheumatic Diseases at St. Joseph Health. Dr. Lahita, good morning. President Biden's vaccine mandate for federal workers is officially in effect. Some workers have protested, but it has been effective in raising the rate of vaccination. Now, they're going to face a court battle when it comes to companies mandating the vaccine, right? What are your thoughts on requiring the vaccine outside of a hospital setting? And also, what about the argument from people who say they have natural immunity, they should not be required to get the vaccine too?
Well, Vicki, that's a complicated question. First of all, let me take the last part first. The people who have natural immunity certainly have good immunity, but it varies from individual to individual. As I've said many times, the genetics of an individual, the immunogenetics of an individual, make their immunity different. A person, when we were collecting convalescent sera from individuals to reinfuse it back into people, people who had COVID had varying amounts of neutralizing antibodies, so nobody was the same. Anyhow, the mandate for the government employees, 3.5 million employees, 90% have had one shot, at least one shot, which is really good news because now we have 90,000 daily cases of new COVID in this country, Vicki.
Mm-hmm. Well, according to a new Yahoo News poll, 74% of people in the U.S. believe their lives have gone back to normal since the pandemic began. But as we mentioned, the CDC is warning COVID cases are up 18% across the country. Are we seeing this jump mostly in the unvaccinated community, or does this include breakthrough cases? In other words, do you have to be concerned if you are fully vaccinated and otherwise healthy?
If you're fully vaccinated and healthy, you don't have to be very, very concerned, and you can safely have Thanksgiving with your family. However, it's interesting that those people who are unvaccinated feel that the time for them is more normal than those who are vaccinated. And that's a bad sign. That means that they're probably not wearing masks and social distancing or washing their hands. Those are the ones likely to become infected by the variants. And so those are the ones that I really worry about, the unvaccinated, which are filling our hospitals.
Mm-hmm. The White House now responding to overseas lockdowns over COVID, saying the U.S. will not do the same. First, take a listen to what the White House COVID-19 response coordinator had to say about that.
No, we are not headed in that direction. We have the tools to accelerate the path out of this pandemic, widely available vaccinations, booster shots, kid shots, therapeutics, including monoclonal antibodies to help those who contract the virus. We can curb the spread of the virus without having to in any way shut down our economy.
Dr. Lahita, we're currently sitting on a 59% overall vaccination rate in this country. Now, again, that does not account for any immunity people have from prior COVID infections. And as you said, that varies greatly. It's difficult to measure. So what do you think the magic number is for us to stop seeing these COVID spikes in infections and, more importantly, in the hospitalizations and deaths?
Well, you know, only 59% of the people in the country have been vaccinated. We need something more like 80% to 90% of the population to be vaccinated. Roughly 1 in 5 people are not vaccinated, and that's a big concern. Many of us are going to travel over the holidays on airplanes, buses, on trains, and you've got to be worried that the person next to you may be harboring the virus and he or she may be unvaccinated, and that's a great concern, Vicki.
Dr. Bob Lahita, thank you so much for your insight this morning.
Now, as Americans gear up to travel for Thanksgiving, they'll have to deal with some pain at the pump, as we've been telling you about. That's because gas prices have surged across the country. Get this, to an average of $3.40 per gallon. That's an increase of $1.25 compared to last Thanksgiving. MSNBC anchor Yasmin Vasugian joins us now from Rego Park in New York City. Yasmin, good morning. So walk us through first just what's behind the rise in gas prices we're seeing around the country, and how is it where you are?
It's good to see you, Savannah. From planes to trains to automobiles, I'm covering gas prices today. Yesterday it was about flying, because that's what you do, right? Thanksgiving week, you figure out a way to get to the people that you love. It's really a classic case of supply and demand. First, when it comes to the pandemic, right, we traveled differently. We started to use cars more. We weren't using planes as much, obviously, because there was, social distancing measures that were in place. Because of that, the demand has gone up tenfold. You think about just in the last year or so, 2021, when folks started to emerge from their homes after lockdown, they got on the road to go see friends and family. Because of that, people needed more gas in their cars. Also, domestic output, that's been down because of all of the hurricanes that we've seen over the last year. I mean, some of the crude oil refineries were shut down because of Hurricane Ida for some time, and they haven't been able to catch up. And then you have OPEC and foreign countries that have oil output. They haven't increased their oil output enough to meet up with the demand around the world, not only here in the United States, but across the world, from India to China, the places that need it most. So because of that, there is a gas and oil shortage, and we're seeing those really high numbers. You think about the state of California, just below $5 a gallon on average. You think about, you have a car that takes normally $40 to fill up. It's now looking like $60, $65, $70 just to fill up your car to get to where you're going.
Yeah, and I know we're expecting tens of millions of drivers over the next couple of days as well. Yasmin, also, though, we did just get word that President Biden will release some of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, that's what it's called, in an effort to ease the rising gas prices we're seeing. Tell us exactly what that means, and is that going to have an immediate impact for Americans who are preparing to travel within the next couple days to get to, as you said, those that they love by Thanksgiving?
Short answer, no. Obviously, it's not going to work that immediately. 50 million barrels are going to be released in concert with other countries that are big energy users. So China, India, the countries that I mentioned earlier. So this is a global initiative for oil output, but it's going to be 50 million barrels over the next couple of months that will ease the burden on Americans and those gas prices as we make our way towards spring and summer months. So hopefully, though we're seeing high prices now and hitting the roadways during the holiday season, those prices will come down as supply is increased, Savannah.
All right, some good news a little bit further down the road, but not quite for Turkey Day. Yasmin Basugian, thanks so much. Let's now get a check on your morning news now weather as we head into that travel.
Yeah, as millions of Americans are expected to travel for Thanksgiving. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with the latest pre-Thanksgiving forecast. Bill, give us some good news.
Yeah, good morning. And I'm so impressed with Yasmin. She didn't complain once about how cold and windy it was outside.
It's
would have been like half the
She's a professional.
I know. I would have been complaining like half the time.
We know that.
So let's show you how cold it is right now. Yes, exactly. The wind chills are in the teens right now in the Great Lakes. They feel like they're in the 20s as far south as like Charlotte, North Carolina. So this is by far the coldest of the season. Atlanta, 31, wind chill 24. Boston had their first freeze, by the way, of the year. That was the 10th latest they've ever had on record. We're waiting to see if New York City actually drops to 32 degrees for the first time also. Tomorrow morning, it will still be cold, but not as windy, so that'll make it feel a little bit better. So we got some winter air definitely in the mornings. The afternoon and the sunshine will feel a little bit better. As far as travel goes, all of the major airports in the big cities, I mean, it is looking good, coast to coast. There could be a little bit of light rain in Seattle and Portland, also Boise. I think they can deal with that. That shouldn't cause too many delays there. And as we look at tomorrow, obviously tomorrow being the busiest travel day of the year, no problems east of the Mississippi. There'll be some weak snow showers in the northern plains and also there in areas around Colorado. And as far as the airports go tomorrow, anywhere in green, I don't expect any weather-related delays at all. The yellow would be possible minor delays because of windy conditions, Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, maybe at Denver International. Also, L.A. could have some windy conditions. But, I mean, this is like a A for travel. I mean, it's not quite an A+, but it's close. As far as Thanksgiving Day goes, still have some concerns around Houston, Corpus Christi, some heavy rain, maybe some thunderstorms. Keep that in mind if you had any, afternoon plans outdoors, and that rain will move eventually into the Ohio Valley. But most of Thanksgiving Day, guys, I'd say, I give Thanksgiving Day like a B+. This is one of the best up to Thanksgiving Day forecasts we've ever had. No complaints.
Right, Bill, what are your plans for Thanksgiving? You have any out-of-town guests, people who are going to have to be contending with that weather?
I need to figure out how I'm going to cook something, drive 2 hours, and have a really crowded oven to heat it back up in. So that's my logistical nightmare.
The oven backup is always real. That's so funny.
Lots of foil, Bill.
Also traffic in the kitchen. All right, Bill, we'll see you next hour. Thank you. Welcome back. New developments this morning in the investigation into the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. A new batch of subpoenas have been handed out by the House committee investigating the riots.
Yeah, and they include some high-profile allies of former President Donald Trump, like longtime Republican operative Roger Stone and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitali joins us now. Ali, Roger Stone and Alex Jones. This comes after Steve Bannon was indicted for contempt of Congress for defying the committee subpoena. So what are we expecting from Stone and Jones? What are they saying about this, and are they expected to show up?
Yeah, Vicky, the broad contours of this latest round of subpoenas are people who were involved in the attack on the January 6th Capitol in terms of the planning of the rallies that we saw both at the Ellipse and at the Capitol itself on January 6th. In terms of Stone and Jones, though, these are names that our audience are going to know really well because Alex Jones, a longtime conspiracy theorist on the rightmost flank of the party, of the conservative movement, and then, of course, Roger Stone, a longtime ally of former President Donald Trump, someone who has long been an agitator in Republican politics. For his part, Stone says in a statement, "I have said time and again, I had no advance knowledge of the events that took place at the Capitol on that day." His statement goes on to say, "After the subpoena is served and after my counsel reviews the request, I will make the determination of how I will proceed," which is to say, he may not be cooperating, which, knowing Stone and knowing Alex Jones, is not exactly all that surprising.
Well, 3 other people were also included in this round of subpoenas. Who are they, and what is their alleged connection to January 6th?
Yeah, as we were saying, these are all people who were allegedly involved in the planning of the rallies that eventually led to the events on January 6th at the Capitol. Some names that our audience may be a little bit less familiar with: Dustin Stockton, Jennifer Lawrence, and Taylor Budowich. Budowich worked for Kimberly Guilfoyle and Donald Trump Jr. during the Trump campaign. The other two were part of the planning of this rally. So again, it speaks to the larger issue that the January 6th committee is trying to accomplish here. We've seen a broad range of subpoenas here. These are meant to get to the planning and execution of the rallies at the Capitol. We've seen other such subpoenas to this effect before, people who were involved in advancing these rallies, getting permits for these rallies, and then of course, we've seen other subpoenas that try to speak to other parts of this. For example, people who were working in the White House.
Ali, today is also the deadline for other subpoenaed Trump allies, Stephen Miller, former press secretary Kayleigh McEnany, personnel director, all these folks to turn over documents. What's the expectation? Are they going to comply? And what happens if they don't?
Yeah, wide range of people on that list. There was a document deadline yesterday. There's another one today for several people who have been subpoenaed by the committee. And they're people who were close to the former president when he was in the White House, people like Stephen Miller, Kayleigh McEnany, Johnny McEntee, all of these people who in many cases are still close to Trump right now, even as he's outside the White House and potentially planning another bid for the presidency. So for the people who we've already seen not comply with subpoenas, we know that they've not complied because Trump has told them not to. He wants to exert executive privilege over the information that they have, the documents that they have. It's something that you could fairly expect that he could be telling some of these other people not to comply as well. But their documents deadlines are today. I think the real deadlines you got to watch out for are the ones where they're supposed to actually physically appear for depositions.
All right, Ali, we know you'll keep an eye on it. Thanks so much.
Let's now take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
Matt Bodner joins us now from Moscow. Good morning, Matt.
Vicky, Savannah, good morning. Well, we're going to start things off today with a tragic story out of Bulgaria where a bus carrying 45 people crashed and burst into flames early this morning. Most of the victims were tourists making their way back to North Macedonia from holidays in Turkey. At least 12 children are among the dead. Several people reportedly escaped the bus as it burned. They've been taken to a hospital and are reportedly in stable condition. The cause of this accident has not yet been determined. Moving along now, I know we usually save the animal news for last, but here we go. The UK is moving to classify lobsters, octopus, and crabs as sentient beings. In other words, this is legal recognition that these creatures can feel pain. This is all part of ongoing work to reform the UK's animal welfare laws following Brexit. Actually, the initial roster of animals under this project, animals recognized to experience pain, were limited to vertebrates that are animals with backbones. But scientists in the UK have since issued a report indicating that at least many invertebrates, animals without backbones, do experience pain as well. And we wrap up with the story that pushed the animal news to the middle, going to Canada, where Uber Eats is going to soon allow customers in Ontario the ability to order cannabis products through their app. This is actually Uber's first foray into the recreational marijuana market. It's estimated to be a $4 billion industry in Canada, but so far the company has not directly said whether or not they will expand this offering throughout Canada and to parts of the U.S. where cannabis has been legalized. Back to you guys.
That is interesting.
That is interesting. It's especially interesting because of how different the laws are across our country. We have no federal legislation on it, so it's just it's hard to imagine.
Sort of a state-by-state issue. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you. And you managed to find a picture of a crab that made the crab look so cute, its little face.
That was impressive. We'll give it to you, even though it was in the middle. Thanks, Matt.
NBA superstar LeBron James has been suspended for the first time in his career over an on-court altercation Sunday night. It happened when his Lakers took on the Detroit Pistons. While standing at the foul line, James caught Pistons player Isaiah Stewart with an elbow that caused a cut around his eye. Stewart got upset, as you can see there. He tried to go after James. His teammates, a lot of people being held back. Then they eventually were both ejected from the game. Both players have been suspended. Stewart for 2 games, James for 1 game. And that does mean he will miss tonight's game against the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. That's going to be disappointing for a lot of people who want to go see him. He's a superstar.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of probably the reason that a lot of people are actually going to that game. Yeah. All right, now it's time for our weekly check-in, a new series here on Morning News Now focused on all the latest mental health headlines and initiatives, a time we can check in on ourselves and our neighbors, maybe share some of the info that you hear here.
Yeah, it's such a great segment. Dr. Soumya Dave joins us now to break it all down for us. She is a psychiatrist and the author of What a Happy Family. Good morning. Welcome back. Let's start with the upcoming holidays. When we think Thanksgiving, I know I do. I think mountains of food.
Oh, yeah.
A great time to get together, a little bit of overeating. This apparently can also be a time of serious stress for people who are struggling with eating disorders or people who feel guilty maybe about cheating on their diet. Yeah. So could you talk to us about ways that we can prepare or cope so that we're not triggered and we can enjoy the holiday without feeling that kind of stress?
Sure. So this time of year can be complicated for so many. And for anyone who has a tougher relationship with food, I always like to start with some steps. So the first is, can we make a plan ahead of time? Do we know what foods are going to be served? Do we know potential triggers that will be in our environment? And can we prepare for those before that event actually starts? The next is to integrate self-care throughout that holiday time. So whether that's taking that daily walk, talking to a friend who helps us feel comfortable and safe, sticking to the routines that we had outside of this time, so waking up and going to bed at the same time, eating at the same time, that can provide a type of anchor to this otherwise different time in our lives. Next, big topic that always comes up, setting boundaries. So if we do know that certain conversation topics may come up that we don't want to talk to, I always like recommending using I statements and then establishing our limitation. So for example, I don't want to talk about my food intake right now. I don't feel comfortable discussing my weight during this trip. So starting there and then establishing where we are and are not comfortable. Now, we might still need that extra support during this time. And so there are virtual support groups. The National Eating Disorders Awareness Alliance does have a virtual support group that is ongoing during the holidays. So that's also always an option. And then, of course, giving ourselves that self-compassion. And if that holiday season is really stressful, reminding ourselves it will end, it will pass.
That's a great point. And of course, it always seems like it goes by so fast, ultimately, at the end of it.
Yes.
Doctor, okay, I want to turn now to some music news and talk about how it can kind of make us feel. So we had this Taylor Swift album come out that's super emotional. Now we have everybody's favorite sad song artist, Adele. Her new album, 30, recently dropped. Has us all pretty much in tears. She's talked about how it's about her divorce. But of course, we keep listening. And according to Adele, she says her album is meant for people who are committing to themselves and doing therapy. So can you tell us why sad songs make us feel so good? Is there a reason for that? Can they actually help us work through some of our more difficult emotions by hearing someone else be singing about them?
Absolutely. And I love that Adele put it and phrased it that way. I think that is so powerful and meaningful. But so many types of artwork. They help us navigate emotions that might be difficult for us day to day, but they give us a sense of safety in navigating those emotions. So music like Adele's, it lets those sad emotions come to the surface, but it lets us go through them in a way that helps us feel safe. And also, music has been shown to improve empathy as well. So when we encounter those emotions within us, we also have a greater understanding of what someone else might be going through. So I think in so many ways, this is really helpful for all of us when we're listening to Adele's fantastic music.
Just cry it out. It's totally okay.
I know. It's totally okay. It's great.
Yeah, I don't know how you could listen to it without. All right, Dr. DeVay, always great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're back with a look at the ongoing supply chain issues disrupting so many shopping plans ahead of the busy holiday season. One critical link in that chain is getting a lot of attention: truck drivers. Well, a new article on NBCNews.com examines the role truckers and some bad operating procedures really are playing in the supply bottlenecks we're seeing at so many of our major ports. NBC News reporter Aisa Garcia-Hodges wrote that article, and she joins us now. Aisa, good morning. So we've heard that a shortage of truckers, that's really what we keep hearing, shortage of them is part of the problem. But your article reveals that that may not actually be the case, or at the very least, it's a lot more complicated than that. Is that right?
Absolutely. The experts I've spoken to say that one of the big issues is actually retention and then inefficiencies. So retention of truck drivers, this used to be an industry that paid well, and that kind of made up for the fact that there are long hours, you're away from your family, a lot of nights. But now pay is not commensurate with a lot of the sacrifices that people are making. And so there's a lot of turnover in the industry. There are a lot of new drivers signing up, interested to get into this, and then a lot of people leaving. The other thing is at the port, one of the things that experts have said is that there's an inefficiency of how these drivers are being used. And so that is part of the bigger problem. It's not so much a shortage at the port, it's an inefficiency of how these drivers are being used. Savannah.
And I know, according to your reporting, that a big part of this issue here is basically that these truckers are considered independent contractors and not traditional employees. And there are things like being paid by the truckload rather than the hours. So it's not really putting a fire under anybody if they have to sit there for a long time, that type of thing. Walk us through the implications that difference, contractor versus employee, really makes, and then the impact that ultimately that has on all of us.
Essentially, yes, this is they are one of the more vulnerable parts of the port ecosystem. Experts that I've spoken to said that, if there's going to be pressure applied to any part of it, truckers are that part. They are seen as kind of, a more expendable part of it, in that they can be made to wait. If there's anywhere that's going to be crunched, it's that part. Because of the fact that, as you pointed out, they are not compensated in the same way. And so, they are paid by the load. And so no matter how long they wait, that is kind of, companies aren't feeling the strain of that in as many overtime hours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, how can that change? Should it change? I know that there's been some talk of it, but then some trucking companies seem to be against that. Should that change? And then also, when we talk about these ports, like let's talk about, for example, in your article, the Port of Los Angeles looking for ways to change these procedures, get these goods moving more quickly. What should they be doing? What are they considering?
So in California, it may change. AB5 would essentially reclassify a lot of independent contractors or gig workers as employees. Right now, truckers aren't part of that. And so, legally, there's a lot of pushback there. So that remains to be seen whether they will eventually be incorporated into that. In response to your second question, the ports, one of the things we've seen them do is impose fines. They announced that they were going to start imposing fines on companies that left these cargo containers on docks for too long. Just the threat of that was so successful that they've actually delayed imposing that. But it's a clear sign that when inefficiencies are addressed, there seems to be some success.
Yeah, when there's money on the line, let's say, or maybe if truckers were getting paid by the hour. Aisa, thank you so much. Great reporting. Time now for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Silvana Henao joins us now. Hey, good morning, Silvana.
Good morning. So oil prices are slipping today on news the U.S., Japan, and India will release reserves from their emergency stockpiles. This in an effort to reduce prices. According to sources, President Biden had asked China, India, and South Korea and Japan for a coordinated move as U.S. gas prices have been soaring. The White House has been unable to persuade OPEC and other large producers, including Russia, to pump more oil, with the group arguing the world is not short of crude. Tesla has hired a former SEC lawyer and federal prosecutor as a new managing counsel. The company has repeatedly had run-ins with the SEC, most notably over statements made by CEO Elon Musk on Twitter. In 2018, the SEC charged Musk and Tesla with securities fraud after he tweeted he was considering taking the company private and had funding secured. Musk later rescinded that plan, and Tesla and Musk reached a settlement paying a $20 million fine each. And Twitter is hosting its first live stream shopping event this Sunday at 7 p.m., becoming the latest social media platform to embrace the trend. The Cyber Deal Sunday event is in collaboration with Walmart, and it'll be hosted by Jason Derulo. It'll be a 30-minute variety show featuring electronics, home goods, apparel, surprise special guests, and more. Already this month, Facebook announced a test of a live shopping feature for creators, and Pinterest and YouTube have hosted week-long shopping events as well. Guys,
tried one of these out?
I haven't.
Savannah.
I haven't.
I'm curious if
I haven't
things
tried
sell
them.
out or,
Yeah.
how that works. Because
Totally.
you're being entertained, but then you're also trying to shop.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Savannah, thank you so much.
You got it.
Well, as President Biden's Build Back Better bill makes its way through the Senate, the bipartisan infrastructure law he signed last week, he's already pumping more than $1 billion in the U.S. economy. That money will help fix the country's aging roads, bridges, and waterways, and also reconnect communities of color divided by past projects. NBC News Now correspondent Isa Gutierrez shows us how that infrastructure spending is addressing inequities across the country.
We rely on it to get to work and school. It provides our families with clean drinking water and reliable internet connection. But some say infrastructure has historically been developed at the expense of communities of color across America.
The reality is historically, poor communities, predominantly African American, increasingly Hispanic, have been divided throughout the history of this country so that people could bypass the urban core, get in, make their money in the city, pay no taxes, might I add, and then get in their vehicles and go back to the suburbs. That's just not right.
President Biden signed a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, but it leaves spending largely up to the state's discretion, which is raising concerns about equity.
The investment should be focused on these communities where deliberate government policy, both redlining, the location of highways, underinvestment, location of polluting device uses, that's where we should emphasize this investment. I think there's a special obligation on the part of government to redress that harm that has been created.
In New Orleans, Treme resident Amy Stelly knows all too well the impact of growing up near a busy freeway and how it affects a community.
We've lost our lawyers, our doctors, our retailers. These people couldn't do business here anymore. The film of pollutants that rest on our houses and the commercial structures and even under the highway itself. So the pollution is visible.
This year, the White House pointed to the Claiborne Expressway in her neighborhood as an example of historic inequity. She hopes some of the new funding will be used to remove it and improve public transportation instead.
One thing that made the city work when it was at its most populated, which was 600,000 people, we're at about half that population now, was that we had great transit, great bus service.
As states draft plans for new infrastructure, some residents worry that they'll lose their homes to make way for new freeways, or that bridges and highways will divide their communities, increase environmental harm, and limit green space.
The question the city should be asking is, how can we rebuild the fabric of the neighborhood, reconnect it?
The new bill includes about $211 billion in discretionary grants. To receive this money, new projects must prioritize racial equity and climate change. The bill also includes some funding for the Reconnecting Communities Initiative, which aims to reverse some of the historic damage in cities divided by freeways.
It's unprecedented to give money for transportation and have standards relating to equity and climate justice. That's a big deal.
But funding for that initiative has been whittled down from $20 billion to $1 billion, a drop in the bucket for the $1.2 trillion bill. Still, it's giving communities hope.
What we do have to do is make sure our voices are heard and make sure that we have a seat at the table. And the infrastructure bill has made way for that because nonprofits have the opportunity to apply for some of the funding.
In Houston, Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis sees the new bill as an opportunity to repair historic damage to communities isolated by infrastructure and to start tackling climate change head on.
The focus ought to be on how we give people a pathway, a highway, a road to a better life, to a better future. And climate change is part of that. Mass transit is part of that. But $1 billion compared to nothing over the first couple of 100 years of this country is a big deal.
We're back now with the latest in our series on food security as concern about climate change grows.
Yeah, one farmer is taking steps to make sure the food supply stays consistent while also helping his Denver community. Here's NBC News Now anchor Morgan Radford.
He may not be your typical farmer.
My previous career was actually in the arts.
But Roberto Mesa has some fresh ideas.
We're able to harness the 300 plus days of sunshine that we get to be able to optimize our production of food.
He's part of a growing generation of younger first-time farmers.
So what are you guys doing here?
So these are broccoli greens.
Using high-tech greenhouse technology to grow fresh local food and get it into urban areas.
It sounds like this is pretty different and perhaps a little bit better for the environment than traditional farming.
So we're able to save water, right? We're able to grow year-round. We are producing a cleaner crop.
But when the pandemic hit and customers dried up, Mesa discovered a new need.
How did the pandemic affect your business or your workflow?
We didn't know if the restaurants were going to reopen. So we lost about 60% of our revenue in a week. We needed to find ways of pivoting and ensure our viability.
Which is why he made his community part of the plan by creating a homegrown supply chain.
So this is like the second step here.
Yeah, this is the second stage of the whole process.
That gets other locally grown products to where they're needed most.
We bring in other products from other local farms so that we can create a beautiful box like this for the families.
Families like Catalina Silvas.
Así que, señora, ¿qué significa tener comida saludable y fresca? What does it mean to have healthy, fresh food? It means a lot for you all. It's something you need.
Putting a sustainable future and a healthy meal just an arm's length away. Morgan Radford, NBC News, Denver.
Our thanks to Morgan Radford for that report. And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.